Before we look at the specific tenses of English, it's important to define what a tense actually is. In order to clarify this for students, we need to have a clear view of what we mean by tense when we talk about time and aspect. So in this video, we're going to look at these three ideas and think about how they relate to the English tense system. So what is a tense? In order to define a tense, we need to keep some key principles in mind. Firstly, a tense represents an action or event through a verb as happening in a specific time. Secondly, a tense, a pure tense of English, is communicated by using morphological change in the verb. That means we use verb endings and we change the form of the verb itself to show its placement in time. Thirdly, tenses use auxiliaries to help the main verb to change its time or its tense, and verb endings such as ed or ing to place the verb in time. So we can define a tense as a representation of an action or event in time, communicated via morphological change in a main verb using auxiliaries and or verb endings. So this gives us a good definition of what a tense of English is, and we should bear these things in mind as we work through this course and think about the tenses and the details of form and meaning that we communicate to students. A fourth principle of tenses is that they are made up of two parts. They have time and they have aspect. So time and aspect makes tense. So let's think about time first of all. We'll show time in blue and aspect in green for this video. So time clearly shows when the action actually happens. So if we have a present tense verb, we can say that the present verb is happening in a present time. And we can often see this from the time word or the time reference, which is used in a sentence. For example, today is a present time, this week is a present time, this year is present. Even recently, meaning up to now, so including now, is a present time word. So if the action happens in the past, we use a past tense verb, and that is said to happen in a past time. And again, if we look at some time references, we can say that yesterday is a past time, last week, and any amount of time with the word ago, 3 years ago, 2 minutes ago, 15 years ago, doesn't matter how long. If we use the word ago, then the past is applicable to that tense. So we've talked about present and past. The other time which we can communicate in English is the future. Now the future is a time in English, but not strictly speaking a tense. So English, thinking purely in tense forms as we've defined them, English does not have a future tense, and we'll see why in a moment. So let's go back to time. The time of a tense we can see by looking at the auxiliary which we use. So if we see a verb phrase which talks about a tense, then we can look for a present auxiliary in a present tense. So present tenses always use present auxiliaries. And the three auxiliaries which we use in tenses are do, be, and have. So if we look at the present forms of do, be, and have, we have this range here: do or does, is, am, and are, have, and has. These are all present forms of those verbs, so they appear in present tenses. In the same way, a past tense always uses a past auxiliary. So again, with do, be, and have, we can look at the past forms of those verbs. So we have did, was or were, and had. So, moving on to aspect. Aspect is a little bit more challenging for learners. It's quite abstract, actually, as a notion. Aspect refers to how the speaker views the action that they're talking about. So it's quite easy and quite objective to put an action into the past or the present, but then how the speaker views the action might be more subjective. So aspect is a little trickier to teach. Let's have a look at the aspects of English. So we have three aspects, which are simple, continuous, and perfect. So we'll run through those and have a look at what they mean and what I mean by a speaker viewing a simple, continuous, or perfect action. So a simple action is seen as a complete unit, is a total action, and it cannot be interrupted by other things happening. We'll see what this means in a moment, and especially when we look at putting these tenses onto timelines, because we show simple actions and continuous actions in quite a different way. A continuous action we can say is unfinished at a specific time. So in a present continuous tense, the action would be unfinished at the present. In a past continuous tense, we would say that the action is unfinished at a point in the past, making it a past continuous tense. Perfect tenses are used to refer to actions which happen in relation to other times or actions. So perfect tenses work in conjunction with other actions which happen before or after each other, and we'll see those again displayed visually on timelines as we work through the course. So, we can see an aspect of a tense by looking at the full structure of the tense. We said that time is communicated by the auxiliary, present or past, or aspect is communicated by which auxiliary we use, and the form of the main verb. So, for example, simple tenses take a do auxiliary, either present or past, depending on the time, and an infinitive verb or an S ending. For example, he goes to school every day. Continuous verbs take a be auxiliary, so again, could be present, could be past, and a verb with an ing ending. For example, he was watching TV. There we have he was watching. Was is the past of be, and watching has an ing ending, making it a past continuous tense. Perfect tenses use a have auxiliary, again in the present or the past, and they use a past participle verb. So remember that a past participle verb is the third form of the verb that we often talk about. For example, in the verb see, we could say that see is the infinitive, saw is the past simple form, and seen is the past participle. See, saw, seen. So the third form, seen, is the past participle form. So have plus past participle makes a perfect tense. Right, so we can see that tense is composed of time and aspect. So we can have present tenses with different aspects. We can have the present simple, present continuous, present perfect. We can change the time to past, and we can have past simple, past time, simple aspect, past continuous, and past perfect. So some tenses are made up of one time and two aspects. So these are the perfect continuous tenses, and we'll look at these later on in the course as they're a more advanced tense, more complex, and are generally introduced later in a course of study. But if we look at the example, we can see that the tense is present perfect continuous. It has one time present and two aspects, which are perfect and continuous. We'll look at a quick example of that. I've been waiting for an hour. Here we've got a have auxiliary, which is in the present. V means have. And then we have a be auxiliary in the past participle, so been. So I have been means it's a present tense. It's perfect because we've got a have and a past participle. And then we've got the main verb waiting with an ing, which makes it a continuous form. So I've been waiting for an hour is the present perfect continuous tense. We can also change the time and have a past perfect continuous tense. Same structure, except because the time has changed, the auxiliary has changed. So rather than have, we've gone to the past with had. She had been eating when they arrived. So, another principle which we've mentioned already is about the future. So, why does English not have future tenses? First reason is, when we talk about the future in English, it doesn't necessarily require morphological change in a verb. We often use a modal, for example, will. And in the example here, it will rain later this afternoon. The main verb there is an infinitive. So will plus infinitive makes a future meaning, but not strictly speaking a tense. This form doesn't change depending on the person. So we can say it will rain, or I will run, or they will go. Always the main verb is in the infinitive form, so not strictly a tense change there. Here we've got another example. he will go for a run later this afternoon. Again, go still in its infinitive form, despite the he verb there. So not strictly a tense. And even in question forms, will they finish work soon? Again, we've got the auxiliary will and the infinitive verb finish. So this is a modal plus infinitive, not strictly a tense. So think about some other future forms. Think about going to, for example. Does it follow the same pattern of infinitives only? Make different sentences with going to, changing the person from I, you, he, she. Does the verb change? If yes, then it's a tense. If not, then not strictly speaking a tense. Second reason that the future is not really a tense in English is we don't have a specific set of grammar structures which carry future meaning. We can use what we call future forms to do the future job in different ways. For example, the will example is used to make predictions. Also, it can be used as an uncertain form with words like maybe or perhaps, and it becomes less certain about the future. We can talk about the planned future by using a present tense there, present continuous, can talk about the future. And we can even use present perfect tenses, like when I've finished in the future, I'll give you a call in the future. So we have a range of different ways of talking about the future. We can use present tenses, we can use other phrases, we can use modal verbs. So it's a bit more complex than a regular tense in that we use a range of different grammars to talk about different kinds of future as we see them when we're speaking. Another example here is a very specific one, future events which occur on a timetable, for example, a plane or a bus leaving. So we can say our plane leaves, present simple, at 4 tomorrow morning, clearly in the future. So be careful with future forms. The video later in this course will explain a few different future forms and how to teach them, but be aware that if you describe them as tenses, it can be a little bit misleading for students. Right, so in summary, we can say that tenses are formed with auxiliaries and verb forms. The auxiliaries show the time when the action occurs, and the verb form shows aspects of meaning which are communicated about how the speaker sees the action. So endings and participles can show this within that time period. And important to remember that a tense is made up of a time communicated by the auxiliary and an aspect communicated by the auxiliary plus what kind of verb is used after it. Okay, so as a task to follow up from this video, have a look at a textbook that you use and practice identifying tenses in, say, a reading text or in a grammar lesson. Think about the procedure to identify a tense, find the auxiliary first, think about whether it's present or past to give you the time, then look at the verb form and identify the whole tense. This will tell you about time and aspect, and therefore you'll be able to identify that tense easily.